What the heck is the difference between a mutual fund versus an index fund? Oh, honestly, I can't believe there's still confusion on this subject this late into the 20th century. But that's probably just because the nerd in me is talking, because I think if I know something, it must come pretty naturally to everyone else as well, not realizing not everyone wants to nerd out on finance stuff. Yeah, Zempuck here. All right, another day not working for the man. Man, I'm just so happy whenever I say that. And I do need to take a deep breath before addressing the simple questions that I saw on the fire group via Facebook that I found, right? Well, one of those questions that I thought everybody already knew the answers to already, but apparently they don't. So first, let me read the question, and I quote, "Looking for advice and opinions on mutual funds versus index funds. I'm 42, looking to start to invest in one of these, looking to see which is better," end quote. Now, maybe it's because the original posters around my age range that this surprised me an extra bit. Really, in one's 40s and haven't started investing in funds yet? Sorry man, I don't mean to sound harsh, right? But I'm genuinely surprised at how this question is even phrased, right? Because index funds are mutual funds, right? But not all mutual funds are index funds. In other words, this question makes no sense. Index funds are a subset of mutual funds. It is as if he asked the questions like, what do you like better, meat or beef? Say what now? Because all beef is meat, okay? Anyway, but in a way, I also understand why this question is asked, because cultural context matters, right? Today, so I'm going to define quickly what both of them, but really get into what the general perception is on the pluses and minuses of both, right? As they're meant to be and as we think they are, right? Anyway, if you're intrigued by what I might say, please subscribe, like, and comment, and share, and all that social media buzzwords or whatever, because I am rich enough for me and will be great regardless. Right, so number one, right, mutual funds. Well, this is just an investment vehicle that groups a bunch of stocks or bonds together. Okay, that's all. Now, this term has existed for as long as people realize that diversification is an important thing to do. It is the answer to the question, why would anybody want to put all their eggs in a single basket, right? Or even a countable number of baskets, as in, let's say, a handful, right? A reasonable comparison for mutual funds would be, well, any individual investor's list of individual stock picks, for example, right? Heck, if you pick more than one single stock to invest in, technically what you'd be doing is running your own, a mutual fund of stocks, right? I mean, maybe you wouldn't call it a mutual fund specifically because you're not trying to get others to invest in your basket of stock picks, right? If you did and you charge people for it, congratulations, you've just made your own mutual fund. Of course, in the real world, mutual funds are run by professionals who presumably knows better than the layman, right? All funds are made or managed by somebody, like a literal person. Whether the funds actually pick stocks by being actively traded via human decision or not is irrelevant to this definition, right? That's the key point to remember. But at this point in the world, I would say, or time in the world, right? I would say that mutual funds are kind of shifted in its generally perceived definition, almost to always mean that we're talking about the actively managed mutual funds, right? That's technically incorrect, but I have to assume this is what the OP meant when he asked this question, okay? Now, number two, index funds are a subset of mutual funds, as I've said before. The only difference is index funds are funds, they're still made by people, but instead of having humans do research and pick what to and when to buy and sell, index funds simply buy and sell based on whatever index they're imitating, right? So actually, the level of human decision making is much less than the actively managed kind of mutual funds, right? That's partly why their fees are on the lower side, especially compared to actively managed mutual funds. This is reasonable because in the actively managed funds, what you're paying for is some specific human's level of talent or expertise. By the way, I need to mention that not all index funds are actually, the same, right? All index funds are passive, but there are many indexes that cuts across regions and industries. Though, frankly, the most common way index funds are being viewed these days are the broad market level index funds, right? An easy example would always be, let's say, what Warren Buffett has put in his will for his family on how to handle his money, right? The family will. He just said, hey, put most of it into an S&P 500 index funds. So index funds can never beat the markets because they are designed to simply, well, be the market. So they cannot beat the market. That's the power and probably perceived weakness as well of passive investing, right? And index funds are the poster child of this type of passive investing. So point number 3. So what do I think the OP is actually asking, right? I'm going to use logic here, and I think what he really meant was, what's the difference between active managed funds versus passive investing in the form of broad index funds, right? The passive investing side is actually the cornerstone of FIRE, right? Because no one who's interested in FIRE would tell you to go pick stocks individually or pin your hopes on some specific manager, and there are good reasons for that. If you pick stocks individually, you might lose all your market value because all them eggs are in too few baskets, right? That is why we want to diversify to begin with, thus moving towards funds generally. And yet, if you pick an actively managed mutual funds, you're just pinning your hopes on some other singular individual. So instead of picking a stock, you're picking a person. Sure, that person might know better than you at any given moment, but the problem is, will they be that great year after year, decade after decade? Or what happens when they die? And what happens to the funds run by a specific expert then, right? Does that get inherited by somebody else? Would you ditch it then? The problem really comes down to a professional can do fantastically for, let's say, 20 years, but it only takes 1 or 2 truly bad years to wipe out all the gains. Now, that could obviously happen in the broader market as well, but a broader market index fund will almost always be even more diversified than any actively managed fund, right? A clear example is this, you've heard of Cathie Wood, right? She's a famous fund manager that's popped up recently. Everyone loved her fund when tech was going up and up in 2020 and 2021. But by this year, her most famous funds dropped like a brick, right? Much faster than the markets because her holdings happen to be concentrated all on the losers. Just look at a 5-year chart for her fund, ARKK, right? It went from 37 bucks to 5x that, about 150 in 2021, back to $35 again this year, okay? Yeah. How the heck would anybody be able to pick some genius who's always making the right calls? Now, if you know a method, let me know, and I probably won't believe it anyway, because all humans are highly fallible, as individuals at least, right? Much, much more so than collectively as a whole. Okay. So, for me, the conclusion is simple, right? If you go the actively managed route, sure, you might win big if you happen to pick the next Warren Buffett, but the chances of that happening is almost infinitesimally small. After all, how exactly would you have discovered such a genius, right? Is it a kid? Is it a kid of a friend? Do you have some hidden Einsteins that just happens to live next door to you, right? It's not impossible, just unlikely. Now, frankly, if you really wanted to look for that needle in a haystack in terms of a person, if you're really good at, making those precise picks and you trust your method, why wouldn't you just redirect that energy and power of research to picking singular investments instead, right? Yeah. So instead of doing that, do the right thing and just ride the market as a wave, right? Because all of our feelings of security when it comes to how market trends is at a societal level. Beating the market is a fool's errand. Now, I know I won't convince anyone who styles themselves as being the once-in-a-generation genius at investments. But if you're the next, if you're the next Warren Buffett, personally, then sure, ignore me. But for everyone else, yeah, just go passive. It'll make your life easier and you'll be able to sleep better at night, okay? Cheers. I'll approach it.